Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, I'd like to thank Dr. Ding for a wonderful sharing, because you're making my job much easier. I'm going to talk about how an application is assessed. And this is the workflow. So you can see that we start off having the subject convener assign readers. And then the first reader is going to nominate external reviewers. This is not applicable for the IDS Research Infrastructure Grant, which has another process. And then the first or second or third readers will individually consider the external reviewers' assessments and the rating of the proposals. And also they will actually provide meta comments based on the external reviewers' assessments. Then we're going to have the assessment panel meeting. And actually, in this meeting, there will be a discussion of individual proposals and finalization of the rating. So you can see that actually this whole process is based on a peer review mechanism. And not only does it have external reviewers, there are the readers providing meta comments, and furthermore, the proposals are discussed at the assessment panel meeting. Then the assessment panel is going to make a recommendation to the steering committee that will endorse the panel's recommendation. And then finally, the funding approval results will come out, being announced by RGC. So essentially, as you can see, the peer review mechanism is upheld, and generally, if the final rating is at 4 points or above, it will generally be recommended for funding. Now, I'll start off by describing the faculty development scheme. And I think if you had listened more carefully to Dr. Ding's sharing, you may observe that the whole exercise boils down to one of convincing the readers of your proposal. You need to convince why this research problem or this topic that you're putting forth is a worthwhile problem. Why this problem? Right? And then you need to convince why you as the PI is the best person to take up this problem and take a stab at it. And therefore, you may recall that hinges a lot on your track record, what you have done in the past, what are some of the international standards or the previous work that has been done. And in fact, you have to show your awareness, you show your knowledge, you show your insights in this. It's part of your track record. And then, so why this topic, why you, and then why the proposed methodology, why your approach. So is there anything that the previous work has not addressed? Is there any gaps that previous approaches have not sufficiently addressed? And therefore, your proposed approach has an advantage because it takes into consideration what has not been done. Is there any aspect of your approach that is creative, innovative? So again, why this topic, why you, why the proposed approach, and why, finally, why is your whole plan, your research plan, a feasible one? Feasibility in terms of the time, the funding, which relates to the manpower, and also that maps well to the scope of your problem. So it always pays off to be very clear about the scope and how much do you think in terms of manpower and time, which translates to funding, of course, you will need, and how you're going to plan that. So all this together why the topic, why you, why the proposed method, and why your plan is feasible. All these dimensions need to come together well so that whoever reads your proposal is convinced that you're going to do a good job and you're going to generate valuable research outputs. Now, of course, we're not asking, I think as readers, as experienced readers of proposals, we're not asking you to be perfect as you look into the crystal ball to be able to predict the outcomes perfectly. You may even talk about possible alternative solutions that you're going to explore and how you're going to pick and choose among them, right? So you can talk about your options, talk about dimensions that you have considered, and you can, in this way, present your research plan and possible research outputs coming out of this investigation. So you can see that I just covered the objectives, your research agenda, how you're designing your research, your methodology, why is it feasible, in what sense is it innovative. And the last point, which is new this year, is called research impact. So in the guidance notes, you will see that in terms of research impact, the definition is demonstrable contributions, beneficial effects, valuable changes, or advantages that the research can qualitatively bring to the economy, society, culture, public policy or services, health, the environment, or quality of life, and that are beyond the academia. And it may include social and economic impact and research that translates into products and services, as well as research that aligns with important policy, community, and social objectives. So in a nutshell, it is what are the benefits, what potential impact your project will generate, where is the value, or where is the potential value. So it is important for each proposal to cover all these points. And in fact, you can see that, I also write proposals every year, and I think the process of writing a proposal is one that actually helps you learn new things. It actually helps you stay abreast of, in your field. And therefore, in that sense, it is a very, very valuable opportunity that paves the way for you to develop your research capability. And in particular for FDS, we hope that the research experiences can translate into new knowledge and teaching and learning. Now, in the most recent exercise of FDS, we have observed that the quality of the proposals varied across subjects, and comparatively, the submissions under humanities and social sciences subject had a higher quality. And the number of funded proposals under this subject has increased significantly. In terms of point 2, we found that generally there are few proposals that attempted to generate knowledge beyond the current state of the art. Perhaps most of the proposals are more in terms of applications. So in general, we also would like to point out here that PIs are advised to pay more attention to the methodology in relation to theoretical framework to ensure that there is no flaw in the research design. And the proposals should have sufficient elaboration on the proposed research methodology and also the potential contributions of the research to theory and or practice. So essentially, I think one point to note here is when you write, try to make sure that you write very clearly. In fact, not only should you write very clearly, you should actually formulate your whole idea very clearly so that the readers of your proposal can get your idea. And if you're doing applied work, it is always important to check that there is sufficient grounding in theory so that it's not a hack. Right? It's not a solution that will not generalize. If it's grounded in theory, we seek that it will generalize in other similar circumstances. Now, one point we also noticed in this most recent exercise is that some proposed research actually are more empirical in nature, but the the approach that was put forth involved very few samples. So sample size is really a concern to the panel because the proposed research needs to include sufficient samples to generate reliable conclusions. I mean, we're talking about statistical significance. We're talking about power in terms of, your investigation and drawing conclusions that are convincing. And as you also saw from our previous presentation, the reviewers' comments should be treated carefully because, in fact, as a member of the assessment panel, I'm very appreciative of the many reviewers that actually devote their time and effort in reading all the proposals we sent to them and also providing very useful comments. Now, do remember that the comments are there not only to justify the judgment, the scoring, or the assessment of the proposal, but in fact, most of the reviewers of these proposals hope that their comments can help the PI improve their proposed work, their proposed investigation. So it is important to devote sufficient attention and try to address the reviewers' comments, especially for resubmissions, because if you have improved your proposal and resubmitted it, one of the key points that will go into the subsequent assessment of the revised proposal is whether the concerns from the previous review exercises were sufficiently addressed or sufficiently considered. You might say, well, I think this comment is irrelevant to the problem that I'm pursuing, or you might say, oh, I have, based on the review comments, I have reshaped my problem, and therefore I have turned to a slightly different angle and perspective in coming up with my revised proposal. That's all okay. We hope that you can take advantage of the review comments if you should be considering resubmissions. Now, in terms of engaging undergraduate students in FDS projects, do try to do so because it provides a training opportunity for the undergraduates. And also, please be reminded to apply for the related allowance that amounts to $2,500 per month for 10 months. And also, please be reminded to apply for teaching relief in order to give you some breathing room given a heavy teaching load in this self-financed sector. Now I'm going to move on to the next scheme, the Inter-Institutional Development Scheme. Now, the IITs has the objective of enhancing the academics' research capability and to keep them abreast of new developments and challenging research topics in relevant fields through the organization of workshops or short courses on an institutional or joint institutional basis. So you can see that the assessment criteria are very similar, as I mentioned before. But actually, because this is an IIDS and because the objective is what I just presented to you, therefore, it is important to think of this symposium or this workshop or this short course that you are organizing. You need to be able to spell out how it is going to build up the research capability of your institution or among the partnering institutions. So the choice of the topic in relation to the choice of the speakers is very important. In the most recent exercise of IIDS, we see that the quality overall was similar to the last round of funding exercises, and comparatively, the submissions under the business studies subject had higher quality. And also we found that the proposed budgets of the proposals were more reasonable when comparing with last year. And the PIs are advised to elaborate on the proposal how your research capacity of your institution will be built up, and also how you can foster academic collaboration. So if you're inviting some renowned researcher to come, or a group of renowned researchers to come to your institution and run this symposium, run this workshop, run this short course, you can also talk about, elaborate on what are some of the activities that you can inject to follow up with perhaps more, somehow more engagement, more interactions that can maybe continue even after the event is over between yourself as an academic, a member of the self-funded academic institutions or across your partnering institutions with the invitee, or also maybe your own activities among yourselves after you have attended the events that you organize. So next I'm going to move on to IDS, the Institutional Development Scheme. Now, starting from the 2019-20 exercise, the IDS has branched out into two grants, the Research Infrastructure Grant and the Collaborative Research Grant. So this is a very new development. And the objective of the IDS Research Infrastructure Grant is to build up the research capacity of the local self-financing degree awarding institutions in their strategic areas. Now, again, here, IDS Research Infrastructure Grant, we have been running it for several years now, and I think one should pay attention to the fact that because we have been running it for several years, so the use of the Research Infrastructure Grant must make sense if you happen to be proposing for another one for your institution, especially if you have gotten previous RIGs for IDS. So it is important to, again, spell out the strategic direction of your institution and how your newly proposed research infrastructure grant is going to continue to build up the capacity in your research institution. So again, that touches on the long-term impact and sustainability. What are some of the deliverables? It can be generating more FDS, building up capacity, generating more FDS grants, and it can be perhaps being able to inject the, being able to use the new resources and do some research and come up with some outputs, like, I'm just thinking out loud, like case studies that you can go back and inject it into your teaching and make good use of it. So I just want to share with you the observations from the most recent IITs RIG exercise. The proposed research infrastructure cannot be too specific to a particular discipline because the proposal should aim to conduct research after having built up the research capacity. And we hope that with the RIG, you can build up the capacity, and then you can also further utilize the grant in collaboration. So the research themes, they should have enough details, and the scope of the proposal should have clear objectives with detailed implementation plans and sufficient justifications of the proposed budget items. So for example, if you are asking for subscription to, let's say, real-time financial data, I mean, these are very expensive. And again, a subscription, it just comes and goes. You pay for the subscription and maybe you make good use of it. But then after the grant is spent, the subscription is over, then you don't have that data anymore. Then what do you do about it, right? So how are you going to make good use of it? And if you are subscribing to a whole series of these data sources, then you need to make sure that there is enough utilization of these subscriptions. So the last thing the panel wants to see is there's like too broad a scope in terms of the data resources, and there's not enough utilization. Okay, so let's see. Next, I'm going to talk about IDS Collaborative Research Grant. Now, this is the first time we are running it, and The whole point of this collaborative research grant is to encourage collaboration among local self-financing degree awarding institutions, or collaboration across disciplines within an institution. So again, you can see these words come up again. Now, here, because it's about collaboration, how to derive synergy, how to cover more than one disciplines and also derive synergy, or how to derive synergy across institutions is most important. How you are going to effectuate the collaboration so that the overall collaboration is greater than the sum of its parts. And why is it viable? How are you going to make it viable? Now, because this is the first time we have seen the CRG proposals, I'd like to share especially some points or some observations. So we hope to see that the collaborative research has 2 or more institutions and or group research activities that operate across disciplines. And when we say across disciplines, we don't mean different fields that are pretty close together. Try to think broader in terms of the collaborative research grant. And the project team should have at least 1 eligible co-PI if you are doing cross-institutional research projects. And again, the research fields may come from different subject disciplines, and you need to talk about the complementarity and the synergy. Again, setting out clear strategy. Now that involves including the relevant expertise in the team. How do you bring about different expertise into one project, and how to derive synergy amongst the team members, and how they fit together? So it's not sufficient to just have a group of people with different interests, but how do you make them work together, and how do they fit together? That is very important. Some proposals that we received look like larger scale FDS projects with a more ambitious scope. So we actually seek to nurture more collaboration and not just larger scale FDS proposals. Now, also some proposals involve a substantial outsourcing activities, outsourcing significant parts of the research work. This is also not good because the grants are important in grooming local research talent. So one must make good use of the grants, not to outsource it to some company or some external bodies, but rather try to make sure that the grant is well spent in grooming local talents. So I'd like to quickly run through the new arrangements of the RGC funding scheme of this 2020-2021 exercise. So again, you saw the pathways to impact statement. I've talked about what we meant by that. It is an effective way to incentivize the applicants to articulate how you will secure impact, what you propose to do, and how you propose to start gathering evidence on impact from the outset. So it's not like you come up with a project, you don't know where it's going, but after you finish it, you say, okay, let me think of what may be the impact. So this is where a section where you can spell it out. And in terms of eligibility of co-PIs, apart from the eligible academics of self-financing institutions, you may also invite academics from UGC-funded universities to take up the role of the co-PI in the project. Now, this is your choice as a PI, whether you want to involve UGC-funded universities people. But in any case, it will not involve any transfer of the project grant to the UGC sector. Also, in addition to the PC, co-PIs may apply for funding support for engaging relief teachers. So I think that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.